Welcome to another episode of Colonial Powers Playing Monopoly, where the British and Americans make the rules, own the board, and if you complain, well, you're a security threat, or even better, a terrorist.
Throughout history, colonial powers have taken lands, displaced indigenous populations, and rewritten the narrative to serve their interests. Two cases stand as stark examples of this ongoing injustice: the forced displacement of the Chagos Islanders and the occupation of Palestine. Both cases reveal the same playbook: territorial control, suppression of native populations, and the indifference of the international community. This is the story of two peoples, one forcibly exiled without resistance, and the other still struggling to reclaim its land. One has been erased from history, while the other is labeled as terrorists for fighting to regain their freedom and stolen homeland. For centuries, the Chagos archipelago was home to a thriving community of fishermen and farmers. Families lived on these islands for generations, building lives, traditions, and a sense of belonging. But in the 1960s, the British government decided that these people were expendable. In a covert agreement with the United States, Britain detached the Chagos archipelago from Mauritius in 1965, establishing the British Indian Ocean Territory by it. The deal came at a devastating human cost: the forced displacement of the entire indigenous Chagossian population. This expulsion cleared the way for the construction of a US military base on Diego Garcia, the largest island in the archipelago. In exchange, the US offered Britain strategic and financial incentives, including waiving certain UK debts and assisting with the development of nuclear submarine technology. Britain, in turn, assured the US that the islands would be delivered devoid of inhabitants, reportedly stating, "We will make sure to give you the island only with birds." This decision led to decades of legal and political battles, as the displaced Chagossians fought for their right to return to their homeland, a struggle that continues to this day. Palestine, a land home to an indigenous people for centuries. A land where Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted. But in the early 20th century, everything changed. In 1917, while still controlling Palestine as part of the Ottoman Empire, Britain made a controversial promise. The Balfour Declaration pledged support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, despite the fact that Palestinians made up more than 90% of the population. It was a promise made without consulting the Palestinian people who already lived on and owned this land. After World War I, the League of Nations granted Britain control over Palestine under the British Mandate. But instead of governing fairly, the British facilitated mass Jewish immigration while suppressing Palestinian resistance. Palestinians revolted, demanding independence. But Britain responded with force, crushing the rebellion and jailing or executing its leaders. Meanwhile, Zionist groups trained and armed themselves for the future battle over Palestine. By 1947, Britain, with strong backing from the United States, pressured the United Nations to intervene in Palestine. Under Western influence, the UN proposed a partition plan that awarded 55% of the land to the Jewish population, despite the fact that they comprised only 33% of the population and owned just 7% of the land.
We will start it now. Afghanistan, no. Argentina, abstention. Australia, yes. Belgium, yes. Bolivia, yes. Brazil, yes.
Palestinians rejected the plan as unjust, but Zionist groups prepared for war, determined to seize as much land as possible. In a broader geopolitical context, the creation of Israel served multiple purposes for Western powers, particularly the UK and the US. Europe and Western countries, after facing the aftermath of the Holocaust and dealing with the pressures of post-war reconstruction, saw the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine as a way to resolve what they viewed as a Jewish problem, effectively exporting it to the Middle East. Simultaneously, the region's oil wealth and its strategic location, particularly in relation to Soviet influence during the Cold War, made it a key area of interest for Western nations. Zionist leaders, understanding these dynamics, played along with the Western powers, which in turn supported Israel's establishment as a strategic ally in the region. Before the British even left Palestine, Zionist militias launched Plan Dalet, a military strategy to take over Palestinian lands by force. Massacres followed, like the infamous Deir Yassin massacre, where over 100 men, women and children were brutally murdered.
בטנטור היה משהו נורא. טנטור היה כפר עשיר, בתים יפים, גרים כמו אירופאים, אתה יודע, וגם אנשים היו לבושות ויפה, ובאמת היה כפר... אחד אנס שם איזה ילדה בת 16, משהו כזה, אתה מבין? אבל זה מכוער מאוד, היה לנו בחור אחד ונפטר, הוא היה פרא אדם, הוא לקח פשוט מאוד ורצח אותם בתוך המכלאות. בתוך המכלאות, הם היו במכלאות, אתה יודע, חוטי ברזל כאלה, עגולים כאלה, אספו כל הגברים. הם יושבים שם, כל העם, על הרצפה, ובא מישהו ולוקח תת מקלע ומתחיל זה, מחליף מחסנית. מה אתה חושב זה?
Fear spread. Entire communities were forced to flee their homes. By the time Israel declared its independence on May 14, 1948, nearly 750,000 Palestinians had been expelled or forced to flee. The Nakba was not just one moment in history. It was the beginning of an ongoing struggle. Over 500 Palestinian villages were destroyed, erased from the map to ensure refugees could never return. Today, millions of Palestinian refugees remain stateless, denied their right to go back home. Britain's role in Palestine mirrors another dark chapter in history, the forced expulsion of the Chagos Islanders. Just as the UK handed over Chagos to the United States for a military base, it played a decisive role in the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. The Nakba was not just a historical event, it continues today. Palestinian land is still being taken, more refugees are being created, and the fight for justice remains unfinished.